everyone, Moro here again. My sister's birthday was coming up, and like usual, if I have an idea for a craft project as a gift, I will make one. Now, my sister is an avid fan of Marvel Rivals, as am I, as you can tell. She really likes the character Peni Parker, and she was one of the first heroes my sister played and got good at. I believe Peni Parker was also my sister's first lord. So, what kind of craft idea did I come up with? I came up with an idea to turn a regular old red hand-me-down hoodie into a Peni Parker themed hoodie. I planned on covering up most of this hoodie with hand-painted graphics. Here's a screenshot of myself in the unpainted hoodie. As you can see here, there's a hole in the front of the fabric, close to the left armpit area. It was hard to find a plain red hoodie from the thrift store, so I had to purchase one with a small bit of embroidery on it. I researched a way on how to remove embroidery, but there's no perfect seamless solution. Basically, you have to use a combination of cutting tools like scissors or X-Acto knives and a shaving razor. There's always a chance of when you do this, you accidentally cut a hole through the clothing's fabric itself. And that's what happened here. Not to worry, however, I will cover up this hole with one of the graphics I plan to paint on later. It will be completely unnoticeable when I am done with this project. Moving on to the screenshots I took from within the actual Marvel Rivals game itself, I took a variety of different screenshots of Peni and her robot spider. I needed shots from many different angles and poses. Once I deemed that I had enough, I got to chopping them up and arranging them about how I wanted the different character design elements to appear on the hoodie. I went through multiple different iterations and eventually settled on a design layout something close to this. I kept this file saved as a Photoshop file so that I could go back to it and look at the individual layers and what each layer has underneath it and such. My plan for this design was to have most of the body of the hoodie represent Peni's mech robot. The arms will be the robots, the chest will be the robots, the lower part of the body will be the robot's hands, the back will be the robots, and the hood will be the robot's head. Peni will be smack dab in the center, and her left hand will cover the hole in the fabric that I accidentally made. The look that I'm trying to achieve here is quite clever if I can toot my own horn. I want it to look like that when you wear this hoodie and put your hands in the front pockets, it will look as if you are holding Peni in your hands, just like how the robot does in the game sometimes. When Peni is not actively in the mech suit, that's how she sometimes sits down. I want the person wearing it to look like they are wearing a spider mech cosplay of the sorts. And here's the side view. I got a bit lazy along with the back of the shirt, and I didn't bother pasting any of the in-game screenshots of the robot's back that I took. But I made sure, though, to test out the idea that I had to divide Spider's head in two on either side of the hoodie here. That way, when the hood is pulled up, the sides of the head would look like the mech robot's head. For the remaining areas of the hoodie, like the back and the sleeves, for example, I was planning on just referencing it directly from the character's model in-game screenshots that I took. Now finally moving on to actually getting started on drawing out the designs. Because of how detailed Peni's design is, I decided to measure out and cut a piece of white scrap fabric and paint on that. That way I'd figure to have more control over the fabric. Also, when I was doing research on how to paint on fabric, they did mention that if you're trying to paint light colors on dark or medium tone fabrics, you need to do an initial coat of white paint. Therefore, painting on already white piece of fabric skips on that step. One of the suggestions for painting on fabric is when you are sketching out your artwork onto fabric, you need to use a medium that is not permanent and washes off easily. Many suggestions I've found suggest using chalk, but unfortunately, I don't have any. What I do have, however, is a set of washable Crayola markers that I have left over from my childhood supply of art. I tested ahead of time to see how easily they would come off a piece of scrap fabric, and with a bit of water, the marker comes off very easily. So that's what I'm going to do here. drawing my sketch of Peni Parker that I will later paint more permanently over and then cut out and attach to the hoodie's front. I changed my mind a few times along the way when creating my rough sketch. I switched up her pose quite a bit. Ultimately, I decided upon the idea to have Penny in a pose similar to her idle animation when she's set as the background hero on the play screen. The little thing she does when she's deploying a spider from a web between her fingers. Once her pose has been roughly mapped out, time to sketch out the smaller details such as the eyes, hair, clothing, detailing, etc. The sketch is now completely done. It's time to go over it with the more permanent fabric paint. Exactly what kind of fabric paint though? Well, I've always found fabric paint to be too expensive for how little you get. But I was probably just looking in the wrong places, so that could be on me. But I have a large supply of acrylic paints anyways, so I was going to paint my fabrics using my already abundant and cheap supply of acrylic paint. However, if you just go ahead and paint plain old acrylic paint directly onto fabric and don't do anything to it, it'll eventually flake off with continuous wash and wear. Not to also mention, it would make your clothing uncomfortable to wear because acrylic paint dries stiff and hard. So how do you turn acrylic paint into flexible and durable fabric paint? There are a few ways. But to be on the safe side, I am choosing to mix in a liquid known as Textile Medium with my acrylic paint. According to the bottle, the mix ratio should be 1 part paint and 2 parts medium. I just used a set of measuring spoons to accomplish this. Depending on how much area I intended to paint on, I would mix about that much. For example, if I want to cover a medium to bigger sized area of one color, I'd mix 1 tablespoon of paint with 2 tablespoons of textile medium. Mix thoroughly together. Once all of your paint is done, make sure to wait 24 hours and heat set it, meaning iron it. But that's way for later, down the line. Here, I am finally starting to work with the fabric paint. I begin with the line art layer first. You can do this either way. You can start with the line art layer first, or you could fill in the colored areas first. I personally chose to start with the line art, so I can still see the shapes to fill in with color later. If I start with the coloring the shapes first, I will not be able to see the sketch anymore, and I won't know where to paint the line art. However, it's still possible to do the latter. I've heard of some people going over the line art with a Sharpie, and it will show through your paint, meaning you can still see the sketch lines to go over later for the line art. Sharpie's a slight bit more permanent, however, so it will be somewhat visible in the final product. Just be aware. You know me, once I am done lining over the sketches, I go back in to add some line weight. I thicken some areas and keep other areas thin. Usually the thick lines are in opposition to where I imagine the light source to be. This is just to create an overall more dynamic drawing. It's finally time to fill in the line art with color. I know the top portion of Penny's suit to be black, but in order for the line art to still be visible, I decided to add a bit of white to the black paint here, making it more of a very dark gray. Penny's hair does seem to be a darker color than the top of Penny's suit, so I won't add as much white as I did to Penny's outfit. Now for a lighter gray for a few areas on Penny's suit. Time for the white areas of Penny's suit. Remember how I've said in other videos that I don't usually work with pure blacks or whites because it can sometimes cause art to look flat? Well, aside from the pure black line art I just did, I will not be using pure white for the suit. I will add a very slight bit of blue-gray to the white. I am finding it slightly difficult to paint within the line work with this method I've chosen. Sometimes I overlap the line art a bit too much. So that means I will have to go back later once the paint's dry and repaint over some areas of the line art that I accidentally covered up. And last but not least, filling in the color of her face and facial features. I don't know why, but I don't think I want this design to have any shading. Laziness? Or is it just a style I'm going for? I don't know. I just feel it. I will add a slight bit of white backlight to the top areas of her line work. I've also now realized her left arm is a bit too thick and long. No worries. I will fix that later by thickening up the line art on the arm and cutting around it further into the artwork, making it look small. After cutting out the final artwork, I now have to brainstorm how to attach it to the front of the hoodie. I thought of sewing it on, but I run into the possibility of it not staying flat and being bumpy. I received a suggestion as I was making this to use a double-sided fusible web. What is that? It's a piece of fabric-like material that you put in between the two fabrics you'd like to adhere to one another, and then applies heat to the top of the stacked fabric to melt the mesh, causing the two fabric to be glued to one another. I was worried, however, if it was going to work or not. The white piece of fabric I painted Penny on was very thin. There's already paint soaked into it. Is there going to be any room left for the mesh to melt into? I also didn't want to buy any more materials for this project. It was beginning to get expensive in combination, both by time and money. I would probably say, however, I would later regret this decision. Trying the fabric mesh might have saved me so much time later down the road. It is what it is, though. Painfully sewing it on, it is then. There's that hole in the fabric I pointed out earlier. As I mentioned, I already plan on how to effectively cover up this mistake. I specifically posed my Penny drawing to have her hand cover up this hole in the hoodie. And there. It's like it was never there in the first place. After I am done painting over everything, I will go back and turn the hoodie inside out and glue the edges of the hole with fabric glue to prevent it from fraying and expanding any further. It took a lot of time to paint and sew on Penny. Now is time for the background, or in other words, Peni Parker's map, which will fill the entire front of the hoodie. Starting with the sketching phase, figuring out where to put everything with washable Crayola markers once again. I tried my best to draw out the mech's design as symmetrically as possible with measurements and all, but I couldn't get it perfect. Perhaps this was due to the fact I was working with flexible fabric, which was always moving when I was working on it. I mean, this is my first time painting on fabric seriously. I like it though. The asymmetry adds to the handmade human feel of it. Filling in the line art with color now. I want to take this moment to emphasize one important step I missed to tell you all that I did not film. Before you paint on your clothing, make sure you stick a hard surface inside of the clothing. It can be something like a piece of cardboard, foam core, etc. Something you don't mind potentially getting dirty with paint, because there is always a chance your paint may bleed through the fabric and go through to the other side of the shirt. And you don't want that. You can tie the shirt sleeves behind the hoodie, or even pin the sides of the shirt or hoodie to the edges of the board inside to hold it in place. This will significantly prevent it from moving while you are painting on it. To match Penny's outfit, Spider's got some yellow areas on its design as well. The only issue? Yellow is a light color. I will have to apply another layer of yellow paint on top so that this yellow shows up more vibrantly. Now, the reason I chose to use a red hoodie for this craft job was because the mech's design is mostly red. Therefore, it'll save me a lot of paint and time if I don't need to paint these areas at all and simply just leave it the color of the red hoodie. Since the front of the hoodie is now done, it's time to move on to the next area to paint, the hood, starting with the sketch layer first. Moving on to the line art, I paint it black like I have everywhere else so far. I'm really enjoying painting out the interesting variety of shapes found in Spider's head design. Before I fill in the colored areas on the left side of the hood where I had just completed the line art, I need to figure out a way to symmetrically recreate the same line art to the right side of the hood. There's probably some other ways I could have done it, but I decided I would trace the line art from the hood's right side using tracing paper, cut slits into the paper, and then trace through the slits with a Crayola marker. It seems to have worked. Again, not perfect, but the imperfectness makes it more endearing. Remember, the sketch layer of the Crayola markers will come out in the wash. Since I am already here on the right side of the hoodie, I might as well start filling in the colors. Then I'll do the same to the left side once this side is dry. Now I've gone ahead and sketched out half of the back design. I made sure to roughly map out where the middle of the back of the hood was and drew a line. Like I did to achieve a rough sense of symmetry with the hood, I taped some pieces of tracing paper down the middle line of the hood's back and traced away. Once again, I made slits in the tracing paper and drew through the slits with my Crayola markers in order to create an approximate symmetrical design. Line work is done! Filling in those colored areas now. Yellow accents first. After how much time the front, back, and sides of the hood took, I almost reconsidered skipping doing the arms I had planned on doing. But alas, I forced myself to do it anyways. I gotta finish it. Gotta complete the whole design through and through. As you can see here, I am prepping the arms similar to what I had done for the body of the hoodie, but instead of stuffing it with a board, I decided to preserve the sleeves' roundness by stuffing them with newspaper. Sketch, then line art, and fill in the colors. The same process as usual. The most difficult thing at this step, hoping I didn't mix up the designs for the arms, because the symbols on the shoulders are different for each arm, I've noticed. Now for the final step of this whole process, ironing the design. I did wash the hoodie in the washing machine before I did this because I wanted the Crayola marker sketch layer to wash off completely first. The ironing step will make the paint layer melt into the fabric a bit, giving the graphic a longer lasting life. Make sure you do 2 steps before actually applying the iron to the clothing. Put a piece of clean cardboard in between the layers of fabric, and a piece of parchment paper on top of the design you are going to iron. The paint can burn and create some undesirable marks on your design. I personally set my iron to level 4, but yours might be a bit different. It's about the medium heat setting on the iron. Go over each area of the design a few times, pressing down hardly. I've got a lot of area to cover because I've painted on about every surface of this hoodie, so this will take a bit. At least for me it will. And there we have it. The birthday gift to my sister is done. A Peni Parker hoodie. I think it turned out quite well. The paint came out more vibrantly on the fabric than I had thought it would. It has a similar, flexible, slightly plastic feel that professionally printed graphic t-shirts seem to have. I've also already gave it 1 wash since painting it, and the colors have at least survived their first wash. I'm sure they'll survive many more. It all feels quite durable. If you are doing a project similar to this, I suggest not putting it in the dryer and air drying it instead, just in case. My favorite parts have to be the hood and how the arms look when their wearer tucks their arms into the front pockets. Looks just like as if the robot is holding Penny. Overall, very happy with this project. Anyways, that's all for now. Hope you enjoyed seeing me transform a plain red hoodie into something really fun. See you tomorrow, whenever that might be. Bye!